Welcome to Eternal Dread, where fear never sleeps. Tell us where you're watching from, and what time it is, because terror has no limits. If you're brave enough, share and comment, but beware, something might be watching you too. Now, turn off the lights, and let the dread begin. Alright, Jesse, you're going to start feeling a little woozy. I was too focused on the surgeon to notice his assistant sticking a needle into my arm. By the time I even realized, it was already pumping me full of anesthesia. We've got you hooked up to a good cocktail of drugs, just try to relax into it. His words already began to jumble in my ears, slowing down and drifting into an incomprehensible mess as the anesthetics quickly took its hold. Before I could register it, I was completely unconscious. I had been preparing for this operation for months at this point. Male to female genital reassignment surgery. An incredibly invasive procedure, but one I had been dreaming of having for years. A cure to so much that was wrong with my body, I was lucky enough to get with a good surgeon, one out in New York who specialized in this kind of thing. I was even luckier to have my insurance approve it. I don't even know what saint was looking down on me that day, but I'm not one to question good fortune. I had been closely following all of the instructions my doctor had been giving me leading up to it. Certain medications, the halting of hormones, and a generous diet of Gatorade and laxatives was prescribed. By the time the day of the surgery came, I was honestly looking more forward to finally getting to eat something solid than getting the procedure done in the first place. The surgery itself took place in its own special clinic, found on the outskirts of New York. Everyone there was incredibly nice, and the building was specialized to fit my needs. When I entered on the day of the surgery, I was rushed through, made to sign a series of documents, and finally, put under the knife. After what I believed to be 8 hours, I was slowly dragged back to consciousness. I was lying on a hospital bed, the force still placed into my arm, and a tube uncomfortably shoved up my nose. On the arm opposite to the fore was a blood pressure monitor that would tightly squeeze my arm every couple minutes. I could feel 2 tubes painfully connected to my lower region. One was almost certainly a catheter, and the other, I believe, was a drain. My first step was to open my eyes, but even that was harder than it needed to be. My eyelids resisted heavily against any kind of force, seemingly wanting to stay closed. It took almost a minute of considerable effort before I could crack open a tiny slit and finally look back out into the world. The room was pitch black, and it looked like it was night out. I was facing directly towards the roof. I attempted to move my head up and get a better look, but that task was more impossible than opening my eyes. It felt as if a force was dragging my body into that bed, making it extremely difficult to move any of my limbs. At the very least, with considerable effort, I could move my head to either side. On my left, I saw a row of empty hospital beds lined up in formation next to each other. To my right were 2 doors, one that led outside the building, and one that led back to the lobby. Both closed shut. There was also a window that was covered by a blackout curtain, but the little light that shone through it was able to reveal to me that my initial assertion was wrong, and it was still day outside. I was completely alone in this room, my only company being the beeping of monitors hooked up to my bed. That's when the pain got even worse, a splitting pain in my lower region, a sign of a successful surgery, but still pain nonetheless. I could feel every inch of my body that had been cut up and rearranged and stitched back together. I could feel the plastic of the tubes that had been roughly inserted into my body. Each breath was agonizing, and each movement made the pain even worse. I knew what I had been getting into, of course. I knew it would be incredibly painful. But there had at least been the assumption that this surgery would come with copious amounts of prescription painkillers. At that moment, though, I had nothing to hold back the pain. I gritted my teeth and tried to breathe through it, until finally, attempting to call out for help. Helgo! Hego! All my voice could produce were drunk, slurred words. Speaking them felt like trying to speak while underwater, the audible version of attempting to walk through mud. I tried again, but to no avail. Is anybody there? It was clear that this would get me nowhere, so I just sat there, teeth clenched, trying to breathe through the pain, and praying for help that would never arrive. The tube shoved up my nostril proved to be the most annoying of the devices I was hooked up to, making my nose drier than a desert and breathing a painful effort. I wanted so badly to rip it out, but I was scared of doing something wrong and messing up the whole operation. And so I sat there lying down in terrible pain, just waiting and waiting for something to happen. Then I heard a noise, a subtle humming coming from across the room. I had almost fallen back asleep when I first heard it. It had been what felt like hours at that point. My pain had all but subsided into a dull and aching background noise. Not enough to make me want to scream like earlier, but not enough for me to just tune out either. Just something I had to sit with. The noise began to get louder, no closer. It was coming closer to me, a sweet, calming, and melodic humming. It sounded like it was being sung by an older man. He couldn't have been older than 50. It would have been calming for me if it wasn't accompanied by the fact that whoever was humming the tune was getting closer. At first, I thought to stay hopeful, maybe anyone was coming to help. At this point, the anesthesia seemed to have worn off a bit, and I was able to move my body a little bit more, and my eyelids didn't fight against me. I lifted up my head slightly off the pillow, using my left arm to support me. Finally, I could see the whole room. On the wall across from my hospital bed, there was a door to what I believe was the surgery room itself. Unlike the first two doors, however, this one was wide open. It was hard to look inside. Actually, it was impossible to. The room was devoid of any and all light. Like a mini black hole had appeared and sucked out everything within. To the left of the door was a series of cabinets, containing pills and tools, and everything a surgeon would need. To the right, another window, this one also covered by a blackout curtain. But at this point it seemed like it had already become nighttime anyways. The most prominent fixture was the lack of one. There was no person to accompany the humming. I could still hear it. It was getting closer, but I didn't know who was getting closer. "Hello? Who's there? Can you help me?" The humming continued. At this point I could tell it was coming from within the operating room, from within that black void. I strained my eyes to look in, but there was nothing, no one. Just a deep, black darkness. Then the pain started again, worse than last time. It felt as if my insides were being pulled out through my lower region. I could feel every stitch, every tube inside me. Like every one of my senses had been cranked to 100. I tried to hold back my groans, but it was impossible at this point. My clenched teeth gave way to an incredible moan of agony. I looked around again. There had to be something, anything. But I couldn't move. I was frozen. Every attempt at movement sent another jolt of pain through my already exhausted nervous system. My head was stuck up in place, completely rigid, staring through the door. Then something reached out to me through the void. A hand, covered in the same exact darkness as the room itself. The humming continued, this time a more menial, routine humming than a calming kind. The hand continued towards me. "Please, you have to help me. Call the doctor back over. Please, do something, anything." My pleas began to mix with tears as I became more desperate. I wanted the pain to end more than anything. I was terrified, but if whatever that hand was could at least end this, end my pain, I'd be okay. Whatever was on the other end continued, the same routine, humming as always. The hand stretched and elongated out of that darkness until it had long gone past the normal length of a human arm. It stretched and stretched, slowly coming towards me. A viscous black substance dripped off of it as it came closer, splashing onto the floor and covering the ground with its void. At this point, it was close enough that I could see something in its hand. A single white pill sitting there, starkly in contrast with its holder. By now, my pleas had long subsided. The pain had only gotten worse, but my terror and confusion had stopped me from begging. I just sat there, crying and trying through all my power not to scream. My eyes were transfixed, mesmerized by whatever was in front of me, and my teeth were clenched shut in an attempt to power through it. At this point the hand had reached me. It thrust up directly towards my face, pushing its disgusting black mud into my mouth. Still humming as if this were a routine job. I could feel it prying into me as it forced my jaws open with very little effort. I tried to resist it, but every attempt intensified the pain throughout my body. Once it had my jaws open, it pushed the pill down my maw. I had no water, and I could feel every part of it as it slowly made its way down my already dry throat. I choked and gagged and almost vomited before finally swallowing it. The effects were immediate, and I collapsed back onto the bed, my pain gone. I could hear the hand slowly shrinking back, and the humming fade away as I slipped into unconsciousness. Only a single realization lay on my mind, one that I had somehow not realized until then. That was the same voice as my surgeon. When I drifted awake, I was sitting slightly up, a pillow beneath my back giving me support. I didn't know how, but someone had moved me. Even the tube in my nostril was gone, finally allowing me to take a full, deep breath. The light was on, and it looked like it was day out. To my left, I finally noticed her. A nurse, someone who could help me. I was elated, and my mouth curled to a weak grin. I couldn't make out much of her features, but I wasn't paying attention to her face anyways. My gaze focused itself on what was in her hands, a bowl of soup. The pain had overridden any thoughts of hunger, but now that I finally saw the food in her hands, it was all I could think about. I was so incredibly hungry. It had only been days, but it felt like it had been decades since I last ate. She picked up a generous amount of the soup with a spoon and lifted it to my dry and weak lips. It was one of the best things I had ever tasted. It's the kind of stuff you think of when reminiscing on your childhood. The kind of soup that makes you feel safe and at home. For once, I wasn't scared or in pain. I was just happy and comfortable, the warmth enveloping my whole body. The events of earlier were completely gone from my mind. Then my gaze turned up, away from the food in front of me, and I finally took a good look at the nurse. She was smiling, a wide, jagged, disgusting grin, like she was trying as hard as she could to look kind, but still failing. Her teeth were eerily white and straight. The edges of her mouth curled unnaturally wide, and she was looking right into me with such elation and such joy. Looking into her eyes felt like staring into the same hollow void as the door. I didn't want to keep looking at her. I wanted to go back to the comfort and safety of the soup, but it was too late. As my eyes moved back down, I didn't see the same stew I was eating before. Looking at the nurse had broken my trance, and I could see it for what it truly was. It was black and rotten and stank like death. The necrotic smell you get when you pass by roadkill on the side of the road. I lurched back, not knowing what to do, and then the nurse was gone. I was back in the pitch-black room. The lights were off, and it was night outside. I sat there for a long time, speechless, not knowing if it was real or not. I tried to convince myself it wasn't, that this was all some trick of the long-gone anesthesia, that something was messing with my brain. I almost convinced myself too, but a sudden pain in my arm convinced me otherwise. It was a dull, aching soreness that originated from the fork currently inserted into my vein. The normally clear tube that had transported fluids into me was replaced by a pitch-black substance, originating from a newly replaced bag, filled to the brim with the same dark viscous fluid. I sat there, stunned in fear, not knowing what to do. I could hear my heartbeat rising, slowly thumping in my skull, over and over again. A blunt sound that slowly got louder and louder until it was all I could hear. I didn't know what this was, but I needed it out now. I started by peeling off the tape, keeping it in place. I was too scared to rip it off fast, and so I took it slowly and methodically. This probably made it even more painful than it needed to be. After the tape was gone, all I had left was the needle itself. I gripped it tightly at the base, mentally preparing myself. I took a deep breath and slowly drew out the needle. I pulled inch by inch, feeling every part of the long, thin metal as it left my arm, tugging at my skin. After a long minute, the four was out. From the tip of the needle spurted the black substance, and I dropped it to the floor in disgust. I looked back down at where it had been, only to see a pool of blood mixed with murky black liquid quickly trailing out. I wanted to try and cover it with a bandage, but with no good substitute around, I elected to just wipe it on my hospital gown. Now, I could finally try and get my bearings. The first and easiest thing that I realized was that I had to leave, as soon as possible. But that was easier said than done. I had still just undergone an extensive surgical procedure. Everything ached and pained in ways I didn't know were possible, but I still had to try. At least the hardest part was done, and my four was out. I started by removing the blood pressure monitor hooked up to my arm. The Velcro came off easily, and the hospital monitor above me began to beep wildly from the lack of readings. It continued to beep like that for the next 5 minutes, or so as I continued. I then looked down at my legs. I had the same 2 bags connected to me down there, one full of blood, the other of piss. There was no conceivable way of taking them out, so I grabbed them from the hooks on the side of my hospital bed and placed them on my lap. My next step was to stand up, but I couldn't exactly figure out how to do that. My upper leg muscles were completely destroyed from the surgery, and it was impossible to move them. No matter how much I willed it, they remained steadfast against my brain power. I decided to make my arms do the work instead. Trying to keep my legs as close together as possible, I lifted and swung them over the side of the bed. Then, holding onto my 2 bags, slid my feet onto the floor. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears at this point. I wanted to scream and cry and curl up into a ball with all this pain and fear, but I couldn't. I had to leave. I could hear them, the figures. I could hear their indecipherable whispers and groans. They were coming closer. I slid my body back around towards the door and began to crawl, slowly but surely, grabbing the smooth hospital floor for dear life. pulling myself along. My crimson blood trailing behind me, being absorbed into the murky void that populated the room. I could feel them coming closer and closer. It felt like these things were grasping desperately at my legs, pulling at me. But somehow, they had no strength to do so. It was like being slapped with water. They were trying to pull me back, pull me into their domain, but they were powerless now. All they could do was futilely grab at my calf. This kept going as I slowly crawled towards the door, the portal that would get me out of this deep pit, until finally, I made it. I grabbed the key and pulled myself through. As soon as I made it out, the incomprehensible whispering stopped and was replaced with a beautiful silence. A silence that was almost louder than the commotion that had come before. Complete, beautiful silence. I crawled towards the door that led outside, my trail of blood and piss still following behind me. The blood starkly contrasting with the pristine hospital floors. I made my way to the door, to my freedom, and tried my best to get myself up towards it. It felt impossible, pulling myself up. My strength was almost completely gone at this point, and there was no question about trying to get up on 2 feet again. I had to drag myself up the door, the same way I dragged myself across the floor. Handprints full of blood and the greasy black substance covered it as I made multiple attempts to drag myself up, before finally, I did it. The key went in smoothly, and made a satisfying click as I turned the lock. With the last of my strength, I pulled the handle down and dragged the door open to the bright, beautiful morning sunlight. It didn't take long for someone to find me. You stand out pretty easily when you're crawling down the street, delirious, covered in blood, half naked in just a hospital gown. An ambulance was immediately called, and I was put under emergency surgery to fix my burst stitches. It was terrifying waking up again from the anesthesia. I felt the same grogginess as last time, struggling against everything to just open my eyes. It was terrifying, but once they were finally open, I could see that the lights were on, and I was safe. My father came over shortly after, and he took care of me for the next couple days, not wanting to risk another incident. Once I could speak legibly, I spoke about everything that had happened. A couple cops were sent down to the clinic, but they didn't find anything. Not a single person or entity could be found, just my trail of blood staining the floor. The official report was that it was some sort of insurance fraud, that the whole clinic had taken all the money from the surgery and ran. It made absolutely no sense, but it's not like they believed my story. The doctors and the police all chalked it all up to some post-anesthesia hallucinations, that the dark had played tricks on me in my delirious state. But I know what I saw, I know what happened. So that's why I'm posting here. I need help or advice or something. I need closure. I need to know what happened. This is not only your usual story about the person who put themselves in trouble because they were too curious. I tried to put an end to something I considered to be the height of unfairness. My real name cannot be mentioned, but for the sake of the story, you can call me Cherry. I used to work for this big brand that I cannot name as well because of the lawsuits, and maybe worse, that has a hand in several and so different sectors that it seems they want to do everything. They have a branch in my country, and I had obtained a job in administration in 2012. Not the fanciest job despite the size of the company and the reputation of the brand, but hey, at least it was a decent income. After around 2 weeks of work only, the rumors and other inside concerning the company reached my very big ears, and I made sure to get all of them. You see, the job was quite demanding. Monday to Saturday, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. with one pause from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., not to mention the frequent and unofficially mandatory overtimes from 7:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. During each day, there was a supervisor, different for each day and nicknamed after that day, that oversaw everything. They were said to do exactly the same jobs as the rest of us in the administration department, but during the night shifts from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. To this very day, I believe that all of the regular employees only know them by Monday, all the way to the last one, Saturday. So those guys worked for 5 hours only in an entire day, except for the specific day they had to supervise us, and I learnt that they were paid crazy money while doing so less hours. After some time, the crazy money part turned out to be very real and was pretty easy to verify, not from an administration file, since almost everything about them was so secretive, but by just looking at what they parked as they showed up for work. Exotic, expensive machines that looked more like spaceships rather than cars. After 4 months of hard work, I really started to have a real problem with my remuneration and my input compared to theirs. I started communicating with the faceless, voiceless, and always absent manager that we can call Mrs. Vitensen, always via email. I inquired about the requirements to be promoted, if I can call it like that, and join the night shift crew. She told me that one space had to be freed for me to then occupy it. It was crushing but pretty logical. I also learnt through her response that it was not only our department that had a night shift counterpart. However, as soon as the night shift crew and administration learned about my interest to join their ranks, their behavior towards me changed for the worst. Speaking of worst, that is exactly what Monday was. He made a personal mission of his to torment me with work and pressure as if he wanted me to give up and resign altogether. But I considered myself a tough woman and resisted. Tuesday was different, but he had that look towards me, the persistent one that just says, "I'm watching you," and that just makes you feel really uncomfortable. Wednesday enjoyed toying with me, giving me tasks that did not make any sense at all, and that I suspect to be irrelevant for the job and the company. She also liked to order me around and treat me like her personal slave, with that smirk of her that I always dreamt of head-butting off her face. Thursday also liked toying with me, but in a very different manner, asking me strange and cryptic questions such as, "Do you know the meaning of life? What's the most important thing to you? What's the worst decision you ever took in your life?" Really weird stuff given the context. She also had that drained, tired and sad look on her face all the time for whatever reason. Maybe she was not really up to the task. I also remember her for the elegant scent of her perfume. Friday was the mystery and the inspiration fueling the craziest rumors. That supervisor had a black metallic helmet constantly on the head like a medieval knight, and wore a long and fancy black coat that covered their feet and all their features as well, making it impossible to determine if they were a man or a woman. Friday was the only one whose car I never saw, and would just pop up in the office somehow as if they were already there all along. The mysterious supervisor would not speak a word, and only communicate with writings or signs. Just like Tuesday, Friday liked to stare at me, which is worse when you cannot even see the facial expressions and have a clue about the intentions. I always wondered why that company chose to employ a strange character who could not at all interact with clients and visitors. Saturday was the chill girl, except towards me of course, and would often let everyone go home early but not me. There was also that strange rule that we had to vacate the building very quickly at 11 p.m. and never show up during midnight and the night shift. You might understand why later. When I completed 1 year and 7 months of good services, the opportunity to upgrade finally presented itself. Thursday stopped showing up for work without any explanation provided, and we had to be off during that specific day each week until they find a replacement. Sure enough, I thought that I would be soon chosen for the position, but instead, they posted a job advertisement. I was stunned but kept pushing by applying. I was about to get that salary raise and be referred to as Thursday. The application process was strange to say the least, and almost comical in some way. If you were to see that ad, you would think it was either a joke or some obvious scam maybe, but certainly nothing serious at all. It contained questions such as, how many rats have you killed in the last 6 months? How do you handle pests and how do you treat flies? What color do you intend to paint your safe room next time? I mean, were they serious? Such a big brand, big company doing that? I did not remember the job advert for my position and my hiring process being so peculiar. I contacted the manager once again to inquire about the requirements for the night shift role, and that time, she decided to just completely shut me down by saying that I was not qualified. I was enraged. I knew I could do better than the previous Thursday, and also, I was convinced that the job was my ticket to early retirement. I made a first plan to uncover the truth, and shared it with a few people that did not appreciate the unfairness. Among them was Elvina from the customer service department, who I believe has very interesting stories about the company for you guys. She might post one day. What was the result of discussing my plans? Well, when the newly appointed Thursday arrived for his first day of work, he approached me and said with his very soothing voice, "Message from the higher-ups. Stop your shenanigans, or there will be consequences." Like I said to you earlier, I considered myself a tough woman. I did not listen, of course. At first, I was convinced that one of my colleagues ratted to be kept in the higher-ups' good books, maybe because they were eyeing the same position as me, especially Green Snake Darlin. That position belonged to me no matter what, or so I thought at the time. Not to some outsider we did not even know, therefore, I decided to act alone. After all, I was a tough woman capable of everything, and by myself. I began taking solo trips in parts of the building that did not have anything to do with my department, and that was when I discovered the black metallic door. It immediately reminded me of Friday, and the moment I wanted to touch it for closer inspection, the supervisor of that day, Tuesday, caught me in the act and forbade me to ever approach that door. I would hide after hours in the surroundings of the building, just watching what unfolded outside during the nights. At 11 p.m., after literally kicking everyone out of the building, including the supervisor of the day, only the security agent, the only one, by the way, for such an immense facility, would be left inside, and he would lock the main entrance at exactly 11:55 p.m. The supervisor of the day would then just go and come back later at 1 a.m. or hang around outside until their peers' arrival in their flashy supercars, except for Friday, who would just be seen walking to the premises almost out of the blue. There were also a few people I was not familiar with from other departments, which were customer service, marketing, information technology, research, and human resources. What kind of HR work anyone has to do from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. All of them would then wait for the security guard to open the door at 1 a.m. to let them in, only to rush out of the building again at 6 a.m. The cleaners crew arrives in their own van at 4 a.m., and they all stay holed up in their vehicle. At 6 a.m., since they have one of those special inside parking places like the manager, they just start the van and disappear inside the building. I have never seen what they look like. Very bizarre stuff, right? But nothing would stop me from uncovering the truth, even if they told me that death awaited in my workplace. I spent months just watching and monitoring when I could. In 2014, I finally had enough and could not take it anymore. I had to know. According to my observations, Saturday, the day itself and not the supervisor, often came with some laziness and loopholes that I could exploit. That Saturday, I hoped for Saturday the supervisor to let me off the hook, and she did. No overtime that day. However, I exited the building after my shift, changed in my car, waited for the coast to be clear enough, then returned inside the facility, masked, unnoticed, and hid in the restrooms. At around 10:50 p.m., I heard someone enter the restroom I was hiding in. At first, I did not think much of it and just ensured to remain still and quiet, waiting for the person to do their business until they go away. However, I soon realized that whoever it was had a very specific assignment to perform in that particular place. First, the person switched off the lights and plunged us in darkness. I wish I could use my phone to record whatever was going on, but that would have certainly given me away, so I just listened carefully. Then, I heard the sounds of scratching against a wall, as if a sharp object was being used on it. Finally, there was a vivid red light that illuminated the room for about 5 seconds before it abruptly vanished. As soon as the mysterious person left the restroom, the lights came back on. At around 11:43 p.m., I came out to investigate. There was no sign of anything particular on the walls, and I scratched my head trying to make sense of the red light. I ended up just taking random pictures of the walls, hopeful that something would come out of it. I stepped out in the hallway at 11:55 p.m., intending to take advantage of the security guard being busy locking the main entrance. I made my way to Mrs. Vitenson's office and successfully broke in, resolute to fish for any information. Whoever you are reading this, I would be lying to you if I say that I did not get distracted as soon as I was in. You should see the furniture, the designs, the gold, and the space. I would not have minded to live in that office and pay rent, but could I even afford it? I started looking into some paperwork as quietly as possible, hoping she did not have some fancy camera or alert system hidden somewhere. She actually had worse than that. I ended up finding printed versions of my CV and cover letter, clipped together in a dark gray file, which cover had a big red stamp on it consisting of one word, blind. The discovery rendered me perplexed as I could not interpret what that meant. Also, who put that in her office since she was seemingly never present there on any day? Did she also work during the night? The moment I tried to take pictures of my files, I heard a group of people approaching. It sounded like soldiers' boots as the army men jogged towards the manager's office to capture me. I ducked behind the desk, still looking at the entrance, and listened carefully with terror when the jogging came to an abrupt stop right behind the door. The lock had been broken by myself, so I knew that there was nothing left to prevent any entry. The moment I saw the doorknob turn, I completely crawled under the desk, hoping for a miracle. I then heard whoever those people were come in. However, it sounded really wrong. It was as if they just poured inside the office for lack of a better explanation, as if they were no longer using their feet, but were rather all rolling on the floor, and making those disturbing and incomprehensible whispers as they moved around, searching for me. From the yellow light and the rusty sounds it made, I could tell that one of them held an old lantern. Out of the blue, a notification then popped up on my phone. You know, the very annoying one that lets you know that, hey, there is Wi-Fi here, you can connect if you want. I wonder what Wi-Fi that was, because I was sure to already be connected to the company's. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Phone, I thought, for trying to connect me to unemployment or worse. The problem was that even being in vibration mode did not ensure total discretion, so the sound made them stop every movement and whispers, in further suspicion of an intruder. After a few seconds, they moved again, and I heard several hands carefully land on the desk, as if they were being cautious not to put too much weight on the expensive furniture and preventing it from breaking. I then saw very pale fingers, coming from numerous hands, appear on the edge of the desk. But something was wrong about their positioning. There were too many hands close to each other, and the fingernails were completely black and ominously razor sharp. I then saw different kinds of hair appear at the edge of the desk, and slowly coming down, as if different heads, and therefore pairs of eyes, were about to peek at me upside down. I shivered in terror, and probably gave away my location, as my trembling made me hit different parts of the desk involuntarily. I did not know what to call it, instinct? Intuition maybe? But something just told me to close my eyes, because if I looked at those faces... My eyes closed. I then saw the blackness suddenly getting warm as they shone the lantern's light on my face. The familiar scent of Thursday's perfume hit my nostrils, almost tempting me to open my eyes. I just opted to keep my eyes closed and to remain as still as possible. They had caught me. My ordeal did not stop there. I felt several cold fingers land on my ski mask in curiosity and examination. I remained still. Suddenly, a whistle resounded from far in the hallway, and they all started whispering again as they rushed outside, fortunately abandoning me in favor of whatever was priority outside there. I then gasped and opened my eyes as if I was underwater for too long, regaining my breath and composure. The investigation was immediately called off. I had to leave. I stepped out of the hallway, hoping to avoid any round two with them, and was taking random turns until I suddenly got grabbed, pulled in a corner, and a firm hand was placed on my mouth before I could let out a scream. If you want to live, come with me. No noise, no talking, no looking back. A man said. He then pushed me in front of him, holding my head forward and leading me to an unknown destination. At some point, the army jogging and the rolling on the floor sound started again, that time in a very disorderly and rushed way. The whispers were replaced by loud and angry gibberish that were getting closer to us from behind, along with the yellow light of the lantern. We rushed towards an open door. I recognized it to be the black door Tuesday forbade me from approaching one day, and we stormed inside the room before the man locked it behind him. I turned around in reflex to see that it was the security guard, and in response, after locking the entrance, he pushed me into a cupboard that he also locked. Meanwhile, the strange people were banging on the room entrance door, and suddenly went from rage to courtesy as the pounding switched to gentle knocks. Security? A soft woman's voice could be heard behind the door. There's a blind rat in the facility. She added, I want it. The voice then yelled, turning into a loud, male growling voice, rattling the door. What the fuck is that? I whispered on the verge of tears as the night was turning into an absolute nightmare. Shut the fuck up, the security guard retorted, whispering, still right behind the cupboard door. The rage and the banging then resumed. I checked the network reception on my phone, intending to call the police before we both die, but it was impossible. When the time reached 1 a.m., the nightmare stopped, so suddenly that it felt like an off button was pressed, and that was it. The security guard left me inside the cupboard despite my protest, and rushed to the main entrance to open the door for the night shift crew, I suppose. He then returned minutes later, and I heard him casually sit on a chair and sighing in relief. Hey, let me out, I shouted, banging on the cupboard door. Don't worry, you'll be out of here and out of job, at 6 in the morning. I've already reported your dumbass to the others. He replied, What? Why did you do that? You just saved me from I don't know what to just throw me under the bus? And what was that? I spoke. Saving you? You broke into the manager's office at midnight while I'm on watch. I wasn't saving you, I was saving my job. And who knows how many pieces of you the cleaners would have to pick up if... I don't want to have to report to those guys. I don't want to see those guys ever again. Never. He responded. Sven, the night shift security guard, kept me there just as he said and refused to answer any of my questions. At 5:55 a.m., he went out and came back at 6:03 a.m. to free me. That was the moment I saw his badge and his name, and especially the inside of that room. Everything in that room was either manufactured black or intentionally painted black afterwards, making the dim light inside almost useless. Strange things upon strange things. The moment I was out and escorted by Sven, we met a boy of approximately 11 years old waiting for us at the entrance of the building. He was smartly dressed and had some mischievous and vicious smile stuck on his delicate face. The kid explained to me why they had to keep my phone, and how they would not attempt anything against me as long as I keep my mouth shut about the company and its staff. He then assured me that my last salary would be paid in full and fired me on the spot. What? But I swear I didn't see anything, and I'll not say any. I tried pleading. Oh, you sure didn't see enough. The kid retorted. If you did, you wouldn't be alive and well to tell. Goodbye, Cherry. Thank you for your services. He added, No, you can't. And who are you? You're just a kid. What are you doing here? I questioned. A kid? To your blind eyes, maybe. I'm one of the supervisors. You can call me Sunday. He said. Out! Now! Sven growled. Unable to argue further, I stepped out not only of the building and the job, but out of the corporate world, my mind showered with much more questions than before my little investigation. The rest of the night shift crews from all the departments was waiting outside to see me go, and Wednesday seized the opportunity to mockingly wave me goodbye. I apologize for not being able to provide you with answers that you probably wish you had concerning my story and this company. I tried to uncover the truth and failed. I ended up opening my own business in 2018. It is not to be compared to that big brand, but at least I can handle a few things on my terms while counting on a few other people of trust, instead of leaving a very important part of my life at the mercy of those shady people, whoever or whatever they are. I walk my dog in another dimension. Here's what we see. Hello. I am writing this before I head out. Where to? I'm still not sure. See, I like to stick to a routine, but lately me and my dog have been going on strange walks. Let me tell you about some. Please, I need to tell someone. My mom got me my dog, Bud, as a present to help me out with my mental health. I had been going downhill, and this boxer managed to pull me up from the depths of my feelings and into a period of happiness. I say period because soon enough my monsters caught up to me. Anyway, you came to hear about the walks, not my personal problems, so let's get into it. The first day was pretty normal. Maybe too normal. Me and Bud woke up together. He went to grab his leash, and I got dressed to go outside. It looked like a beautiful day outside, so I decided to dress light. Bud got back with his leash just as I finished dressing. I got him a treat for being better than usual at our daily routine, and we headed out. It was in fact a beautiful day. It was very bright, the sun warm on our skin. All of my neighbors were outside, which was odd, as I lived in a more elderly neighborhood. But there they were, all smiling and waving at each other. It was odd, but who was I to judge people being outside on such a day? As I was walking, everyone turned and waved to me, smiling almost in synchrony, one after the other. Again, odd, as most of the people around here were Kaji, old people, more concerned about catching Judge Judy reruns than tending to their dead grass. I looked down, and I don't know much about gardening, but whatever they used, maybe paint, had sure worked on their grass as it shined in the sun. I even stopped to talk to some of them, complimenting their green thumb, and they ran inside to get Bud a treat, which they never did, as they were all very transparent about not wanting to live near a dog, even though Bud almost never barked, and I was very good about picking up after him. "Oh, hello," said a neighbor from behind. I turned to find Pauline, the grumpiest shut-in of our neighborhood, now smiling and jogging in place, now bending over to pet Bud, the target of many police calls about noise disturbances. I grit my teeth in an attempt to make friendly conversation. "Hey there, Ms. Pauline. You've been gone for a while, haven't you?" Bud whines as he pulls away, not a surprising reaction when she yells at him almost on the daily. No, I haven't. Why? Have I been too quiet?" I asked, genuinely confused. She laughed, grabbing my shoulder. "No, you've been gone," she insisted. I started to walk away, saying some sort of goodbye. I heard nothing else from her. Me and Bud arrived home. He went to his bed and almost immediately went to sleep. He has been taking very long naps, almost only waking up for our walks. I collapsed onto the couch, also falling asleep. When I woke up, it was raining. Hard. I stared out the window, sitting up, before my eyes drifted to the door. Bud was standing there, staring at me expectantly, leash in mouth. I groaned, flopping onto my back. Of course he wanted to walk now. I got dressed, and we headed out. Immediately I realized something was wrong. The grass was dead again, and even worse, the houses looked ransacked, boards covering some windows. I turned to my house, but it looked untouched. Bud held his head low, but did his business. As we were making our way back, I noticed something, or someone, staring at me through the broken window. A blank, dark figure, too dark for me to make out any of their features. Bud sensed it, and started to bark in the direction I was looking. Me and him ran back to the house, and I slammed the door behind me. Panting, I passed out. I woke up again. I knew I was asleep for a while, but I knew I had to take Bud out. It was funny, my life now revolved around walking a dog. I looked forward to it, usually, but as of late, what with the weird walks, I was now dreading leaving my house. As it turned out, I had good reason to not want to leave the house, as while the clock said that it was around noon, outside of my window said otherwise. It was pitch black, with not even the street lights working. The lights being out was especially odd, because any time there was something wrong with anything, a neighbor would call the city. I had dismissed the previous walk as a dream. It had to be, it just had to be. I went to wake Bud up, and he only woke when he heard me get his leash. As we walked, Bud had an air of hesitation about him. I would soon find out why. There was a car that would pass us every 5 minutes or so. At first I thought that it was a different car, and paid it no mind. But by the third time it passed, I had noticed some similarities, and by the fifth, I knew we were being followed. I turned me and Bud around, and on the opposite side of the street, a dark figure emerged from the only working street light. The figure was like a walking silhouette, no features, and was as dark as the night sky. Just as we finished passing him, I heard the stranger break out into a run, and Bud turned around to bark at him. I only turned around when Bud stopped barking, thinking he recognized the figure as a neighbor. But when I turned to see, the thing was gone, disappeared into the surrounding dark. I woke up at home, with Bud in front of me, leash in mouth, tail ever so still. I was slumped against the island in the kitchen. I knew what to do. It was odd though, he always seemed to want to go for a walk, but now it was almost like he felt the same as me, like we had to keep walking, like it was a duty rather than a convenience of not having to clean up. I wanted a break, I wanted a rest. I would rather clean up a mess than step outside. I don't know what I'll find, I don't know what will find me. I'm so scared, I'm going to try to not take him for a walk for a little bit. I didn't last too long before anxiety consumed me. I had to walk my dog. As we walked, I didn't recognize anything out of the ordinary, except that I was lost in thought more so than usual. It was like nothing existed, nothing except for me. Walking Bud was fun at first. I enjoyed getting outside, getting exercise. I'm not sure when that changed for me, but then it seemed that I was back in the space I was before I got Bud. Walking him became a chore. I woke up, we walked. Before I go to bed, we walked. Before I showered, we walked. Every 3 to 4 hours, we walked. It became an anxious hell. I still loved Bud, of course, more than life, but the walls were draining me. I must have gone on thinking like this for hours, before I realized that I hadn't moved from my spot on the floor. I had imagined that whole walk. Bud was still in front of me, leash in mouth. Sorry, buddy, but I need to go back to sleep. I woke up in my bed. The sun was out. Yay! I figured that I might as well take a walk with Bud, even if he had gone to the bathroom in the house. I should probably check. Try as I might, I couldn't find Bud anywhere. I called for him, looked for him, but he wasn't there. Even worse, the whole time I was looking, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. It sounded like it was ringing multiple times at once. I checked the voicemail. Turns out I had 42 missed calls. All from my family. Had I really been asleep that long? I decided to start going through them, as it wasn't totally unusual for Bud to play games like this with me. I think he knows how much it bothers me, the bastard. He's such a good boy. The first call was from my mom. She sounded worried. Hi sweetie, give me a call. Hey there, give me a call. Elliot, really call me. Now. Sweetheart, I'm getting very worried. I'm coming over. Weird. I wonder what's wrong. I should walk Bud, I need some sleep. We went for our walk, nothing out of the ordinary happened. The sky was cloudy. There were sirens in the distance, not odd for around this neighborhood. We got back from our walk, and I still hadn't found Bud. What was I walking? This thing that looks at, even as I'm writing this, can't be Bud. It doesn't look real. I want to leave now. I can't do this. Where is my dog? I just want my dog, I love him. and I want to go for a normal walk with my normal dog. I lied. I love our walks. We have some good ones. He's a good boy, really. He didn't mean anything. Please don't do that. I find myself sobbing as I hear what sounds like someone trying to break down the door. They say they are the police. They say they are with my mom. But I don't believe them. They just want to take Bud away. Those neighbors probably called again. I know he barks sometimes, but he's a dog. He's supposed to do that. And then there's the person on my couch. They look just like me, but they aren't me. They can't be, right? I have to move from this spot. Something is dripping from the ceiling, and it's getting on my computer. I'll have to have him clean it up when he wakes up. We all need our rest. They finally manage to break through the door. My mom comes running in. Maybe she can explain all of this. She's always right, after all. She comes running right by me, and towards the person on the couch, though. Weird, I'm her son, not this guy. Wait, why doesn't he have his head on? Where's Bud? I need my dog. It's dark out now. The police had to remove my mom, which she made pretty hard. I don't blame her. I haven't moved myself. Not off of that couch, anyways. Bud stayed with me to the very end, and now, I think I'll take him for my final walk. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Bud. Sincerely, Elliot. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into the boarding house. It wasn't the air, though it felt heavier than it should have been. It wasn't the lighting, though the dim yellow bulbs flickered as if struggling to stay awake. It wasn't even the silence, though it was the kind that pressed against my ears, thick and expectant. No, it was something else, something deeper, something unseen. An unsettling sensation crawled under my skin, cold and unshakable, like the walls themselves were watching, whispering in a language I couldn't hear. I had walked into a place that didn't want me there. The landlady, Mrs. Carter, stood behind the counter, her frail hands folded neatly in front of her. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles, as though time had carved its story into her skin. Her gray eyes, dull, unreadable, rested on me in a way that made my stomach tighten. She said nothing at first, just reached under the counter and handed me a small brass key, along with a neatly folded piece of paper. Her fingers lingered on the edges of the paper as I took it from her. "Read this carefully," she said, her voice quiet, measured, "and follow every rule." There was no warmth in her words, no unnecessary pleasantries. Just a warning wrapped in a simple instruction. I hesitated, glancing toward the wall near the entrance. A faded list of rules was taped there, its edges curling with age, the ink smudged and uneven. I barely glanced at it, assuming it was the usual: no smoking, no loud music, no guests after 10 p.m. I should have paid more attention. I should have stopped and read every word. Instead, I unfolded the paper in my hands, and as my eyes scanned the list, my stomach twisted into a tight knot. Boarding house rules. Lock your door before midnight. Do not open it for anyone until sunrise. If you hear knocking past midnight, ignore it. No matter who they claim to be, they are not real. Always greet the old man in room 7 if you see him in the hallway. If he doesn't greet you back, hide in the nearest room immediately. Do not eat food left outside your door. No one in this house leaves food for others. If you wake up and feel someone watching you, do not move. Do not speak. Close your eyes until morning. If you hear the landlady humming past midnight, do not look out of your window. Do not let her know you are awake. My hands tightened around the paper, the words blurring slightly as I reread them. My mouth felt dry. "This isn't a joke, is it?" I asked, my voice quieter than I had intended. Mrs. Carter didn't answer immediately. She only studied me, her expression blank, before shaking her head once. "Follow the rules, you'll be fine," she repeated. And just like that, she turned and walked away, her slow, deliberate steps echoing down the hallway. I stood there, my heart hammering. The paper felt heavier in my hands now. My mind told me it was ridiculous, some weird tradition, an old superstition meant to scare new tenants. But deep down, somewhere in the part of my brain that still clung to instinct, I knew I had just made a terrible mistake by moving in. I went to my room. It was small but clean. A bed, a wooden desk, a single chair near the window. The walls were a dull beige, bare except for a single painting of a forest that looked too dark, too deep. I ran a hand along the desk's surface. Dust-free. Everything was strangely spotless, as if no one had truly lived here before. The walls were thin. I could hear faint shuffling, the quiet murmurs of my neighbors settling in for the night. A floorboard creaked somewhere in the hallway. I swallowed hard and double-checked my door, twisting the lock with a sharp click. Then, I climbed into bed, the folded paper resting on the nightstand beside me. The rules ran through my mind like a looping whisper. I wasn't sure how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling. At some point, my eyelids grew heavy. Sleep crept in. The silence of the room wrapped around me like a thick fog. And then I heard something. A knock. Again and again. My eyes snapped open. A cold wave of fear crashed through me. A voice followed. "Hey man, it's Adam. My key isn't working. Can you open up?" Adam, my next-door neighbor. I had met him earlier, friendly, talkative, the kind of guy who could make any place feel normal. He had been here for 3 months. He had smiled when he introduced himself. He had seemed real. But the second rule echoed in my mind. If you hear knocking past midnight, ignore it. No matter who they claim to be, they are not real. I gripped the blanket, my breath shallow. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs. Knock, knock, knock. Adam's voice again. This time, there was a slight edge to it. "Come on, man. I just need you to open the door for a second. Please." I almost answered. Almost. But something was wrong. His voice, it sounded close, too close, like he was whispering right against the wood. And yet, there was something else. A flatness. A hollowness. Like an imitation of a voice. Someone trying to sound like Adam, but failing in the smallest, most unnatural ways. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay silent. The knocking stopped. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. For the rest of the night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. The next morning, I stepped into the hallway, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing on me. I hadn't slept. Not really. Every creak of the floor, every distant sound in the walls, every whisper of wind outside had kept me frozen beneath my blanket, listening, waiting, for something I couldn't see. When morning finally came, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like a temporary escape, like something was letting me go, just for a little while. The hallway was quiet, bathed in dull gray light filtering in from a small, dust-covered window at the end of the corridor. I turned toward the kitchen, the thought of coffee the only thing keeping me upright. And then, I saw him, the old man from room 7. He stood completely still in the middle of the hallway, his frail frame wrapped in a tattered, oversized sweater that hung off his shoulders like it belonged to someone else. His skin was pale, almost gray, stretched too thin over sharp cheekbones. His lips were cracked, and his eyes dark, sunken, hollow. They stared at me, unblinking. The air shifted. A chill ran up my spine, sharp and immediate. I forced myself to speak. "Good morning." The words felt small, insignificant against the weight of the silence between us. He didn't respond. My throat tightened. Always greet the old man in room 7. If he doesn't greet you back, hide immediately. Third rule flashed in my mind. My pulse quickened. I glanced around, searching for the nearest door, calculating how fast I could reach it. The hallway stretched longer than it had before, or maybe that was just my fear twisting reality. Seconds dragged. The silence felt alive, pressing against my skin. Then finally he moved. A slow, deliberate nod. No words, no expression. Just that single motion before he turned, shuffling toward his door. I let out a shaky breath. I had followed the rule. But as his door clicked shut behind him, a cold thought crawled into my mind. What would have happened if I hadn't? Well, shaking off that clingy feeling, I went to work. That evening, I returned from work, exhausted. The day had been long, but my mind had been longer. I had spent most of it replaying the morning, the old man's face, the weight of that silence. I told myself I was overreacting. It was just an old man, just a weird set of rules. That was all. But when I reached my door, I stopped. A plate of food sat neatly on the floor. A bowl of soup and a slice of bread. My stomach twisted, hunger gnawing at me after skipping breakfast and barely touching lunch. My first thought was maybe Mrs. Carter left it. Maybe it was some sort of welcome gesture. And then my fingers curled into fists as I repeated the rule number. For in my head, do not eat food left outside your door. No one in this house leaves food for others. I swallowed hard. The hallway was empty. I bent down, hesitating before picking up the plate. The ceramic was cool, the silver lid covering the bowl gleaming under the dim hallway light. The smell of something familiar, something faintly metallic, drifted up. My unease deepened. I carried the plate to the kitchen, every step heavier than the last. I wasn't going to eat it, obviously, but I needed to see what was inside. With a slow breath, I lifted the lid. The stench hit me instantly. Rotting meat. Foul, wet, wrong. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't soup. It was something thick, dark, clotted in strange, pulsing lumps. Something moved beneath the surface, shifting sluggishly like it was alive but struggling to stay that way. I gagged, my hands trembling as I hurled the plate into the trash, the bowl shattering against the inside of the bin. The stench lingered, curling into my nostrils, clinging to the back of my throat. I turned to leave, and then I saw him, the old man from room 7, standing in the hallway, watching me. His face was blank, unreadable. His dark eyes never blinked. Then slowly, deliberately, he nodded once, and walked away. That night, I lay in bed, every muscle in my body was tense. I had locked the door. I had checked it twice. I had pulled the blanket up to my chin like it could protect me from whatever lurked beyond these walls. But none of that mattered. Not really, because something was wrong in this house. And then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., I heard it, a soft humming, drifting through the hallway like a lullaby meant for something else. My stomach twisted. I knew that tune. I had heard it earlier that day, Mrs. Carter, humming to herself as she wiped the counter, her voice light and distant. It had seemed harmless then, but now it feels different. The sound grew clearer, threading its way through the thin walls, curling into the cracks of my room like smoke. It was calm, slow, too slow, like someone drawing out each note deliberately. And the 6th rule says, if you hear the landlady humming past midnight, do not look out of your window. Do not let her know you are awake. I gripped my blanket, my pulse hammering in my ears. Don't look. Don't move. The humming grew louder and closer. And then footsteps. Soft, measured, dragging lightly across the wooden floor outside my room. Each step deliberate, stretching out the distance between them, like whoever was walking was listening for something. They stopped, right outside my door. My breath caught in my throat. The door. Locked. It was locked. But the footsteps didn't leave. And then the doorknob rattled. A slow, testing turn. Once. Twice. My entire body locked up. I clenched my eyes shut, forcing myself not to move, not to breathe too loud, not to exist in that moment. Maybe if I stayed still enough, she would go away. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the humming stopped. The air in the room felt suffocating, thick with something unseen. For a long, agonizing moment, silence. And then, a whisper. Soft. Right outside the door. I know you're awake. A cold shiver crawled down my spine, sinking deep into my bones. I didn't react. I didn't move. I couldn't. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, finally, footsteps again. Moving away. Slow. Measured. The humming started up once more, fading, drifting down the hallway, melting into the night. I lay there, frozen, staring into the darkness until morning. By the next evening, I had made up my mind. I was leaving. I couldn't stay in this house, not after last night, not after the rules kept proving themselves real. I shoved my clothes into my bag, my hands shaking, my mind screaming at me to hurry. Just get out. Don't look back. Don't question it. Just leave. But as I stepped into the hallway, a cold wave of dread washed over me. I froze. At the far end of the hall, the old man from room 7 stood perfectly still. His frail frame seemed smaller in the dim light, his hollow eyes locked onto me. Waiting. Watching. I swallowed hard. Greet him. Say something. Good evening. I forced out, my voice tight. Silence. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't greet me back. My stomach twisted violently. If he doesn't greet you back, hide in the nearest room immediately. I turned, heart hammering, scanning for an open door, any door. But before I could move, the hallway lights flickered. A deep, wet breathing sound slithered through the air, thick and unnatural, coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. And then, something shifted in the shadows. The space at the end of the hall stretched, as if the walls were bending, pulling apart. Something was there. Something big. Something wrong. The nearest door creaked open. I didn't hesitate. I ran. I dove inside and slammed the door shut behind me. From outside, a dragging sound came. Slow. Heavy. Scraping against the floor. Something was moving down the hallway. And then, knock. Knock. I squeezed my eyes shut. No. Not again. A voice muffled through the door. Hey man, it's Adam. My key isn't working. Can you open up? I clamped a hand over my mouth. Not real. It's not real. The knocking didn't stop. Knock. Knock. My breath hitched in my throat, every muscle in my body screaming, stay silent. Then, a pause. A whisper. Right against the door. I know you're awake. The lights in the room flickered. And then, the door handle started to turn. The handle twisted. The door swung open, and something unseen, something cold, something hungry grabbed me. The air rushed out of my lungs as an invisible force dragged me forward. The walls twisted, stretched, swallowed me whole. Darkness, pressure, like I had fallen into something deep, something endless, something that didn't want to let go. I tried to scream, but there was no sound, no air, no me. I don't remember what happened after that, but when I woke up in the morning, my room was still there. My bags still packed, the bed untouched, but I was gone. Outside room 7, a fresh piece of paper was taped to the wall. The rules unchanged, except for one, a new line, written in dark, uneven letters, pressed deep into the page. If you hear someone knocking and claiming to be the new tenant, ignore them. They are not real. I always thought online dating was a modern convenience, until I met Dev. In my early 20s and working long hours in tech, I craved genuine connection. When I matched with him on a dating app, his profile radiated an enigmatic charm. Our conversations were easy, his texts warm and attentive, and soon we arranged a date. Dev drove 100 miles to meet me. Our first date unfolded in a picturesque park, where autumn leaves danced in the crisp air and sunlight filtered through the trees like liquid gold. We talked about everything, from our favorite movies to our wildest dreams. Later, over dinner at a cozy restaurant, his humor and intelligence made me forget the long drive he had taken. I felt a spark of possibility. After dinner, we returned to my small apartment. I was still buzzing from the evening when Dev's demeanor shifted. What started as subtle quirks soon became bizarre behavior. While I set his bag on the table, Dev's eyes darted around, unsettled, as if searching for something invisible. "I'm sorry if I seem odd," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I have a condition. It makes me extremely hungry, an insatiable hunger." I frowned, thinking it was just an eccentric quirk he'd mentioned in passing. "Hungry? Like you haven't eaten enough?" "No," he replied, his tone darkening. "It's different. I crave things, and I need you to help me find food." His words sent a shiver down my spine. At first, I assumed he meant something exotic or perhaps a bizarre dietary fix. But his eyes, wide and frantic, told a different story. Unsure how to respond, I offered to order takeout, hoping to diffuse the tension. Dev's response, however, was chilling. He stood abruptly and walked over to the living room window, pressing his hand against the cold glass as if trying to summon something. The wind outside moaned like a living thing. "Emma," he said, turning to face me with an intensity that made my heart race. "Please, go to the kitchen and get me something to eat." I can't control it." I hesitated, my mind a jumble of confusion and alarm. "Dev, what exactly do you mean? What are you craving?" Before he could answer, his expression contorted into something half human, half something else. In one fluid motion, he strode over and slammed the front door shut, trapping us inside. I reached for the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. My pulse pounded in my ears as Dev's voice lowered to a near whisper. "Call 911, Emma." "Please," he said urgently, his tone laced with panic and something more sinister. "There's a guy under your bed." My breath caught. "What? Under my bed? What are you talking about?" Dev stepped toward me, his eyes glistening with a desperate intensity. "I'm not joking. Listen, go now, call 911. Tell them what's down there." His hand reached out, almost pleadingly. I fumbled for my phone, every instinct screaming to run. The room, once familiar and safe, now felt claustrophobic and hostile. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers, barely hearing my own voice as I reported the emergency. While I waited, Dev watched me with an unreadable expression. The operator's voice came through, calm and measured. 911, what's your emergency?" I tried to explain, stammering about a mysterious figure under my bed, but the words felt hollow and surreal. The operator promised to send help, and I clutched the phone like a lifeline. Dev's behavior was odd even in his calmness. He drifted to the bedroom and stood silently beside the bed. The room was dark, the only light coming from the muted glow of my phone. I mustered the courage to follow him. Slowly, I approached the bed, my heart in my throat. Under the bed, shrouded in darkness, I saw a shadow, a shape that seemed to flicker at the edge of my vision. I leaned in, the hairs on my arms standing on end, and gasped. There, in the half-light, was a figure. It was indistinct, its features blurred as if hidden behind a veil of mist. The figure shifted, its movement unnervingly slow, and then it vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence. I turned to Dev, desperate for an explanation, but he was already stepping back, as if repulsed by what I had seen. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice cracking. "I can't. I didn't want this." Confusion and terror tangled within me. "What do you mean, Dev? Who is that?" His eyes filled with a strange mix of regret and dread. "It's been with me for years," he said, his voice barely audible. "I try to keep it hidden, but my hunger, it's more than physical. It's a curse, Emma. I brought it here with me, even if I didn't want to." I felt the world spinning. The phone call with 911 was still active, the operator's words distant and unhelpful in the midst of my mounting panic. Dev's condition, his inexplicable hunger, and the spectral figure under my bed all converged into a nightmare I could barely comprehend. Then, as if in a final act of horror, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a split second. When the lights returned, Dev was gone. The door to the living room now stood slightly ajar, letting in a sliver of cold night air. My phone buzzed with the operator's question, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I searched the room frantically, my heart hammering with dread. The shadow under the bed had reappeared, larger now, more defined. I couldn't see its face, but I sensed a malevolence that chilled me to the core. It was as if the figure was waiting, patiently, for something inevitable. The police arrived soon after, their flashlights cutting swaths through the darkness. They found no sign of Dev, only my terrified expression, the unanswered phone call, and a bed that held nothing but lingering shadows. The officers offered little comfort, dismissing it as a hallucination born of stress and isolation. But I know what I saw, and I know that Dev's curse, that insatiable hunger, was real. The figure under my bed remains a mystery, a specter that might have been Dev's tormentor, or perhaps a part of him that he could never escape. Now, every night as I lie in bed, I hear a faint rustling beneath, a reminder that some curses never truly vanish. I'm still waiting for answers, and I'm still haunted by that final chilling order. Call 911. Even as I try to rebuild my life, the shadow under my bed grows bolder, and I can't help but wonder if I've become part of something far darker than I ever imagined. What is the true nature of Dev's hunger, and what, or who, lurks beneath the bed in the darkness? I fear that the answer might be a fate worse than the unknown itself.